Hello, I'm the Archangel Daniel, and this is how God created planets part 2. So, God tried to heat the planet using uranium, and this was poisonous and toxic, and everyone kept dying. Even God kept dying and having to refill his soul with a new body. So the mana helped, but still wasn't enough. So God got rid of the uranium, but the area was still radioactive, and so they had to leave it. And so God created a new planet which had gravity and tunnels, and then decided to use the same type of furnace that God had used to create the shells to heat the planet. It is extremely hot, the furnace. Still there's no atmosphere. And as we can see here, it only heated a small area of the planet. And so this was early experiments done by God in order to try and find a way to heat a planet. So atmosphere was discovered by accident, and it was where there was some gravity element that collected air above the refilling chamber, and God noticed that there was a field there that held it. And so this led God to creating a planet with atmosphere. Okay, so how the atmosphere works is this gravity element that's pointed downwards, and this produces a field which is what we call the atmosphere, and filled with air between the planet and that field, the air remains trapped there. Some of it still goes outside, but not much. So that's what you do with gravity element. You point it downwards and it produces gravity on the surface and atmosphere in the sky. So the design of the star is a shell, as I mentioned in an earlier video, with holes. All the shells for planets and stars back then were made by hand. Even now some of them are still made by hand by God. Jesus also makes them by hand. So God has taught this skill to Jesus and the Holy Spirit as well. The first star did not have gravity, and as a result its combustion was intermittent. It wasn't constant, and it required constant maintenance in order to work. Then the second version of the star had atmosphere. It did not have an orbital gravity field like we have today. Combustion was constant. It was maintenance free and is still going today. Everything burned on the planet. It was so hot. So God had to make a further 12 planets, and he found that the surface of each of the planets was still too hot to live on. So then God had to make a weather system. God thought that water could make things cooler. Maybe that might help. Water was introduced into the atmosphere, the upper atmosphere, through a wormhole at one location. The water then turned to steam, and it produced a wind of 4,000 miles per hour. Can we think of anything in the solar system that would be like that? There are some planets with extremely high wind speeds, and that's the sort of thing we're talking about. One day it was noticed by accident that gravity affected wind speed. So the moon, was created, and it was a shell with gravity element on it that just sat there. There was no gravity field tethering it to the planet. But it did not drift away because it was static in zero gravity. The gravity field stabilizes the weather system to make it livable. The environment was like Ireland during winter. Yes, it was cold, but it was home, and is home. This is planet heaven. So when we look at the moon has gravity element that is pointed at Earth, and this stabilizes the weather system. That's how the relationship between the Earth and the moon and the sun. There is an example of this at Stonehenge, but it needs to be further investigated and observed in order for people to see the relationship. In this history, there are gravity fields for each planetary object in each system from the sun. So there's gravity element that produces a gravity field for planet motion in the orbit around the sun. The planet rotates and tilts for seasons. So planet heaven had planet rotation, and how that is accomplished is how the planet rotates is we have gravity element that's pointing in one direction, and it pulls the planet around. That produces rotation. We have one that fires upwards, that produces the tilt. And the tilt field alters direction between the gravity elements to produce tilt for the seasons. The galactic movement from creation point is accomplished with a pivot star. So at one point in the universe is where the galaxies are all created, galaxy by galaxy. These are tethered, each galaxy, to the pivot star and are then moved through gravity to their endpoint in the universe, which is the center of the universe. This was observed in this history, and Stephen Hawking came up with a theory of the Big Bang. No matter how much explosive you use, you will not produce a planet or a star. You will not produce gravity either. So these things are not by accident. There's no explosion. They're deliberately created by God. The relationship between Earth and the Moon. If we were to go outside 1 meter, we would have an ice age. If we were to go inside 1 meter, everything would become unlivable. That is how fragile and delicate the balance is between this earth and the sun for humankind and all life. There was an incident with Stephen when he arrived in heaven. He continued to believe in his Big Bang theory. We had problems, and he wound up in purgatory. We showed him video after video after video. It wasn't enough. We wound up having to take him back in time to when God created everything from the very beginning. This meant it took 44,000 years to calculate the time travel equation, to go back in time in order for Stephen to witness creation. And he was being punished the whole time the calculations were being made up. So that's the thing about time travel, it requires calculations. The planets, rings and comets. The solar system had 7 comets. 3 of them are gone. The one comet was lost. It flew off into space and just kept going. The Ice Age was caused by a comet. We deliberately collided a comet with planet Earth in order to produce an Ice Age. And then afterwards we had to go through a warming process in order to thaw the planet. The third Tunguska that was lost, the third comet that was lost to this system was a Tunguska comet. This was deliberately brought towards Earth and then intercepted by heaven in order for humankind to know that there had been an intervention in order to protect the planet. In the first history, the Tunguska comet did strike and wiped everything out, and we had to rebuild everything from scratch. That was well after humankind, and that is part of the first history's history. The rings on planets were not deployed until this galaxy had stopped moving. The rings material was carried on board a spaceship and then deployed when this system and its galaxy had stopped moving. The rings are maintained by spaceships from heaven called shepherds. The shepherds watch over the system, and if any spacecraft from anywhere else were to come into the system, the shepherds would know and notify heaven straight away, and something would be done about it if it were hostile. So do not worry, people of Earth, we have the shepherds watching. I'm the Archangel Daniel, and I'm from heaven.